Welcome back to the Dungeon Master's Block, the place where we come to talk about the Dungeon Master, the most important person in the game, the only person capable of playing God, killing characters, and lowering the egos of all the people at the table. I'm one of your hosts, DM Neil, aka Jote Maniac.
And I'm your other host, Dungeon Master Mitch.
And today, we're going to talk about something near and dear to my heart that took up much of my childhood, and we have a special guest. So I will tell you those pieces of information in that order, and we're going to talk about...
The suspense is killing me!
We're going back to our console to campaign series, and we're going to talk about Zelda Ocarina of Time, which in hindsight you probably read as the title of this episode. And our guest is longtime friend of the show, supporter of the show, all-around great human being, and it's Jerad Arteche. And we talk all about Zelda Ocarina of Time.
Dude, you really were excited about this because during our recording time, you held up the N64 game with the box that you have, which is
the collector's edition box, which
the golden holographic.
Yes.
Yeah, we all know what we're talking about. If you love this game, you know it. Phenomenal. We'll make sure to post that when the episode goes live. But speaking of, I've got two things to mention. First of all, you may know Jerad already. You may have heard his voice on our other show, Geek Wars. If you haven't checked out Geek Wars yet, please do so. It's fantastically fun. And if you are a geek of any realm, you will enjoy the trivia, play along as our contestants like Jerad do in that show. And secondly, as we said, this is our second console to campaign episode. And so we are throwing it back to you as our Patreon Dragons on our Patreon feed to vote for our next one. And the vote will be between God of War, the new one, which almost won this time, Final Fantasy VII, because it's back, we've got to talk about it, and then Turok, because who doesn't like hunting dinosaurs?
But before that, we have an Apple Podcast review, and it comes from Sub to Me on YT. And they entitled it Best D&D Podcast for Narrative Inspiration. 5 stars. There isn't any reason why you shouldn't listen. For players, it's a wellspring of knowledge you can use to metagame your way out of any situation. And for DMs, having a wellspring of brilliant ideas to make any RPG shine with narrative glory and the holiest of narrative progression, character development. Not really that, but still. Cast suggestion. Listen to this podcast. So thank you, Sub to Me on YT. I love that review.
That was a fantastic review. Well, Neil, it is time. Let's head to the meat.
I'm starving. We ain't had nothing but maggoty bread for 3 stinking days.
Why can't we have some meats?
The plate meat's back on the menu, boys.
Well, for this episode of The Meat, I want to introduce you to first-time member on the Dungeon Master's Block. He is one of our cosmic Patreon dragons. You may have heard him on DM Nastics before. You may have even heard him on Geek Wars before. Maybe you've even, like we have, met him at a catacon. He is a listener to the show, but even more importantly, a personal friend of mine and Neil's. Welcome to the Dungeon Master's Block, Jerad Arteche.
Hello. Hi, everyone. I'm beginning my takeover now, so, I'm just going to ease my way in now, and then slowly you're just going to hear my voice start Borg-burging.
Everyone wants to do that, but nobody...
I know. I was going to say, Neil, everybody's making those jokes these days. I think that we need to start building up some defenses.
Our current defense is that we do the editing, so...
That's true. Nobody wants
Yes.
that job. We don't even want that job. Well, anyway, Jerad, thank you so much for joining us. It's awesome to have you here on the show.
But Jerad, you know what is coming, and it is none other than a surprise question. And since you have fed us enough surprise questions over the years, I thought it would be apt if I made up the surprise question. Ooh. And tied to the topic at hand, I will ask you, which city in Hyrule would you want to live and why?
Ooh, okay. So the only one that I would think of that doesn't have terrible fates, like at some point or another, would be Hateno Village from Breath of the Wild.
Okay. I like it.
Like, that one's just cozy,
Yeah.
you know? Has a very nice, like, homey feel. Castletown's nice, but, you know, you get it ruined most of the time. Kakariko has terrible monsters under it.
Cozy is a good thing to aim for. That's
Yeah,
for sure.
as long as someone doesn't get too crazy on a chicken and then you're just completely overrun. But
Right.
That's true.
perfect. Well, thank you, Neil, for that question. And thank you, Jerad, for answering it.
As Neil said, this is really the perfect episode for Jerad to join us on. Jerad, you like video games a little bit.
Right.
Just a little bit.
know.
So for our second Council to Campaign episode, we gave you, the Patreon Dragons, a chance to vote. And you voted to talk about Zelda Ocarina of Time. First of all, Jerad, did you vote for Zelda?
What were the options? Because I think
God of War.
It was God of War. The new
was
God of War is
Okay,
my
so
favorite video game in a long
Oh
time.
man, me too. Me
Yeah.
too. That is my
But
favorite video game of all time.
Zelda's-
It was hard for me to reach that decision because like it is newer and it's hard to say something's your favorite when it's like, you know, only a couple years old, but still.
I'm all about that story gameplay balance, man.
Oh,
That
it's-
game just... Mwah,
Yeah, we could go on for hours,
But
we're
it's
not
not
gonna
that
talk about
game,
God
yeah.
of War
'Cause-
this time.
No,
We're
Zelda
here to talk
Zelda
about
still
Zelda.
holds a special place in my heart.
Yeah.
either
Good.
way.
Please don't,
Let's-
because I would have
you know.
absolutely nothing to say this entire time.
So unlike the last episode where Neil had never played the video game, was experiencing it through new eyes, all three of us have played Ocarina of Time. Maybe not so recently, but we want to talk about it from the perspective of inspiration for a D&D game. And one thing that is true with many games, but especially for this game, is there's so much here to talk about that we could do like literally probably start a whole podcast on this, right? But Jerad, why don't we start off, if somebody out there is unfamiliar with Ocarina of Time, they'd never played Ocarina of Time, they'd never played any Zelda games, and you just had to sit down and say, all right, listen, I'm going to tell you about this game. What would you tell them Zelda Ocarina of Time is? Tell them a little bit about that game.
I would say that, I mean, it's sort of the quintessential adventure game experience. You know, you play a character with a past that you aren't too familiar with, starting off in a small, cozy, you know, village home, and get your call to adventure through kind of magical means and set off into the big, open and scary world. Everything's kind of nice in the daytime, and then suddenly in the nighttime, there's skeleton monsters all over
The
the place.
first
Yeah,
time that
like-
happened. Ooh.
Oh, yeah. And, you know, I mean, it's really a game about a world unfolding in front of you, you know, as you play the world. And then right when you think you've probably beaten the game, where a lot of games were shorter when that originally came out, all of a sudden the game thrusts you 7 years in the future and everything's even worse than it was before, and you're an adult now. And
Yeah, there's this big tonal shift for sure. You could almost say that, like, that first part of the game, it's very kid-friendly feel, right?
Yeah.
And then you go to the future, and like I remember playing this when I was pretty young, and I remember that first time that I went into the future, and you walk out of the temple into the city you're in, and there are all the, I believe they're called
Redeads,
Redeads. Yeah, walking around, and I think I was a little scared. Like I was like, I wasn't prepared
like
for this level of creepy.
the whole really nice, like, happy Castletown vibe with the
Yeah.
hyped up music and everything, and suddenly you walk out and there's like purple death smoke around the mountain in the background, and
Yeah.
zombies that it was
I'll be
tough.
honest. I think my first reaction the first time I was playing as a younger kid was, I think I walked out, I saw the Redeads, I went back in the temple, and I put the sword back in. And I was like, nope, nope, I don't want to go there right now.
Oh yeah, and I mean, like, it's almost like a coming of age story in itself, like, just really in the most literal terms of a character that kind of has you know, a pretty friendly, despite fighting monsters, all things considered, a pretty friendly childhood, and the world suddenly becomes different for him.
Yeah, he's even the underdog, because I remember you are walking around your own village, and there's in particular one elf that kind of picks on you because you're not the tough guy and he's the tough guy, and your character, like a lot of games, I feel like back in this time period, it's not like you're actually engaging in speech with them. You're kind of just listening to what they say. So it even gives you that feel of an underdog, because you're not selecting choices of like fighting back through speech or anything. You kind of just take it.
Yeah, and only until you've done something to prove by getting the shield that,
Yep.
okay, well, maybe I will let you out. And then just blocking your way right in front of the bridge.
He's still not even happy about it. It was Mido.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that kind of carries throughout the game. I think that you meet plenty of people who like refer to you as kid, because especially like at the beginning of the game, that's exactly what you are. And just this sense of, like you start off feeling kind of like this little pipsqueak in a bigger world, and you progress to feeling like the hero.
I mean, even then, like, and people look at your character like a kid. He's not allowed in so many places. Like, you have to get certain permissions to get places, and then you kind of got to earn your way up, and then, in the future, everything's terrible.
Even with weapons, you start off with your little dinky wooden sword, and you don't start off with a real sword or a real shield. Like, that's stuff you need to work towards.
Well, even the one that I think even stands out more as that happening is when you try and go get Epona, and like just how, I mean, that you're laughed at that you would even try and do anything like that, and then you just, I mean, kind of steal the horse. Let's be honest, like you want it, but you also just jumped the fence and just kind of ran away with it. But yeah, it's fine. It worked out.
Little kid shenanigans. It's all right. It's
stole a horse, whatever.
All right, so like that's Zelda Ocarina of Time. I think that probably most of our listeners, if not have played and loved this game, are somewhat familiar with it. So let's start diving into some of the nittier and grittier discussion. Let's start pulling elements from this game. Specifically, let's talk about. Let's hold off maybe on the inspiration that we can draw from the story itself. Let's talk about the world, whether that is the land itself or monsters or items. What are things in this game that really stick out to you as this would be amazing inspiration to pull from and bring into a D&D game? What do you guys think?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I think of with Zelda at any point is the creatures, the monsters, and the friendly and unfriendly. Like, I mean, you the first ones that always come to mind are the Gorons. Like,
Yep.
Yes.
just these big, kind of lumbering, friendly, but a little, closed off and tribal. Just a little bit dopey, like...
And yet, like, strong and big and tough, yeah.
Big in literally whatever random sense of big you think of. There's a Goron of that size, too. Like...
and that's this came up with my top 10 episode, this idea, but I'm almost wondering now, are Gorons like goldfish? Do they grow depending on how big of a room that they have to, because there is that one that's just massive.
Biggerin, you got to go get his sword.
Biggerin, yeah, there you go.
Go on that fetch quest.
And he doesn't live in the village; he lives outside. So maybe that speaks true to that Goron physiology.
Then you have the one that makes the giant's knife. That's like you go around the side, bomb the wall, and his whole head is just like right there, filling the cave.
Yeah, it's funny. I had them down as something I wanted to absolutely talk about, and I like in thinking about taking Gorons and bringing them into D&D. I immediately thought of the D&D monster, the Galeb Door, and I thought, what if you took the Goron society and their culture, and you brought it into this monster that has like one page dedicated to it in the monster manual. There's not a lot about it. It's this like big creature that looks like it's made out of stone, but I was like, this is perfect for a Goron, and you could pull that society, you could pull that culture, create it for the Galeb Door, and I think it would work really well.
I love the idea of taking the essence inside of Ocarina of Time and adding it to the stats of something else, because it's already written and designed by people in D&D to be an official release, because let's be honest, if you spend any time on the internet, you can definitely find 5th edition for basically anything that we're going to talk about. But the issue with that is that it is a homebrew thing. You would have to take that as you would and then test it out and hope it works. But taking the idea and then just putting them over the top of something else, I love it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Jerad hit the nail on the head. Somehow Ocarina of Time, and for the most part, most Zelda games, you have almost an alien world, yet it's done in a way and the cultures are there that it feels okay. Like for the most part, Link is human enough and the people he interacts with are human enough, but also you have the Gorons and that seems okay. That seems totally fine. Or then you go over here and it's the Zora and you have an entire... Yeah, you have an entire race of fish people that, again, also seems like it just belongs. So I think that's one of the really cool things in trying to figure out how to do that same thing in your game, of having something that's totally foreign, but also making it feel like it totally belongs in your world.
Yeah, the whole world of Hyrule that you experience in Ocarina of Time, I feel like is great inspiration. Even just the way that the world is divided. You have these sections of the world, like the mountain that the Gorons live on, that it's like, this is like where we see earth elements like all taking place, and we have fire, and you have all these magical woods that are bringing about these forest themes. You have this river where the Zora live, and a giant lake as well. It really has every place like split up, with that big plain in the middle being the center of it all. It has this kind of fantasy division. It's kind of the quintessential fantasy game.
The other one that always comes to mind right now is the Skulltulas.
The Spider Boys.
Well, yeah, and it's such an interesting interaction. It almost feels like a way that you could like wholesale pull that interaction and that back and forth of needing to give those to get things as
the
like
gold
the way
Skulltulas.
Yeah, sorry, yeah. And then where you kill a certain number and then you get these different things that, like, it feels so much like a warlock patron kind of vibe, that it'd
side quest kind of thing.
Yeah, but then it's like exactly, you have the main quest, but even if you had like a warlock in your party, but they need to do these certain things to pay back that patron and get things from them.
I feel like that's a great element to pull upon for a side quest in your game, because if you're just moving from place to place on the main quest, but if it is like an enemy that needs to be defeated and something needs to be collected from that enemy, and you place like one of the or two of those enemies within each quest that you're on for that one character that's trying to collect those tokens, or whether it's a bone from a creature or whatever it is, that's a fantastic side quest that doesn't really divert from the attention of the main quest if these creatures are just kind of all over the world, right?
Yeah, I mean, the players knowing something's a little off the beaten path is gonna, even if they aren't like consciously going after something like that. I know the way that I play a game and the way that a lot of my players act is if they have any inkling that there is like something extra to be gained by just, oh, that looks like the right way, let's go the other way. It creates that really ingrained desire to explore.
Also, this is a total aside, but I was trying to double check like all the things you could get from the gold Skulltulas. I had completely forgotten about this ingenious marketing tool where you get the Stone of Agony, and you have to have an N64 Rumble Pack installed, and the item in game, the in-game item looks like a Rumble Pack, and then when you were close to a hidden object, the Rumble Pack would go off, and that would be the only indication that you were close to it. Well played. Take your greatest game and literally put a mechanic dependent on purchasing another item. Nintendo, not messing around.
There was a time when we would spend $30-something to add something to our controllers to make it shake.
Yep.
And that was like sought after. That was like,
the
my gosh,
Rumble
this
Pack
is amazing. I need this. Why did we need it? I don't know.
Look, try telling me that I was the kid with the Dreamcast with the VMU memory card with the Chow Garden that you would put them on.
Oh,
So
man,
like,
memory cards.
yeah.
All right, I want to talk about a couple elements concerning some characters from this game. First off, something that was definitely a question in Geek Wars Season 2, I believe. Maybe, I don't even know, maybe Jerad, you even had this question thrown at you guys. But Kapora Gabora?
Yeah,
the owl?
Yeah.
That was certainly a question in Geek Wars, but I loved this owl as a kid. I still love this owl.
I'm sorry about your wrong opinion on the...
You don't like this owl?
On the I'm testing if you're paying attention, and then he, like, asked the question, like, do you need to hear that again? And then the yes or no shows up
terrible.
if you're spamming the B button. He says it all over again.
You're right. That is terrible.
Yeah.
I personally hold that against
I definitely failed
him.
for that so many times. But the essence of this old wise owl as sort of this guide, I really like that. I don't know. I've always really liked whether you're taking like beast folk or like an animal and giving it the element of being able to speak. I've always really enjoyed that in fantasy worlds. And to me as a kid running into that owl for the first time, I don't think the first time I played I did spam that button.
You actually cared what he had to say.
Playthroughs running through, I made that fatal mistake, and it is frustrating. And anybody out there who's done that knows that frustration. But the character itself really, I think, would be an awesome inspiration to pull upon for some sort of animal guide to your journey.
So the trope of the wise owl animal guide, I mean that's a classic at this point. I think that to the point where I actually admittedly abused my group of players with it once. With their natural intrinsic trust of such a character that betrayed them. Because people see the wise owl and they're like, and
they immediately want to trust it.
Kapora Gabora, yeah, great. He's here to, and they'll make the jokes about spamming the A button. I'll be like,
Yep.
ha ha ha, go get the thing for him. He's a lich.
That's a great way to turn it on its head, though. Yeah,
awesome.
you're right. You're right. If I was playing, I don't think it matters what character I'm playing. I want to trust the wise owl that's talking to me, especially if the DM's doing like an owl voice and hooing every couple of seconds.
Yes.
I'm in. I'm like, I trust this guy with my life.
Well, yeah, and I mean, there's certain levels to there being more to Kapora Gabora than even the game says. Like, there's certain fan theories that hold a lot of weight that he ends up being the Sage of Light. What is the name of the actual sage? I can't remember. But he has, like, the Sage of Light has, like, the same facial hair that matches the owl, and every other sage shows up during Link's childhood and then is, gone by adulthood, and the owl doesn't show up during his adulthood. So, like, there's this certain amount, like, is this owl actually, this person in disguise? That, I mean, even as a Raru, that's his name. Oh, no, it looks like it was actually confirmed at some point. Huh.
Oh.
Unless the wiki
Also
might
known
be
as
lying.
Kapora
More to this
Gabora.
owl than meets the eye.
But like you had mentioned, like that's the Gandalf. I mean, it's a trope done well. I mean, and they're all different, and Kapora Gabora definitely does wax poetic sometimes. But I mean, I loved they just literally swoop in, do his thing, and then off it goes. It's got other things to deal with.
Maybe he's speaking to other heroes who are running around trying to save Hyrule.
He does not have all his eggs in one basket.
Yeah.
He's really
his
hedging
eggs.
his
Ah,
Yeah, just
Good one.
hedging his bets with a bunch of different heroes. Oh, you're the chosen one. Like,
You are the chosen
just you.
one. The fifth one today.
Don't go in that cave. We lost 4 chosen ones this week.
I thought you said I was the chosen one.
Just chosen by me 5 minutes ago.
well, yeah, you are the chosen one. The other one died. Yeah.
I'm right about. What about Ganondorf? Let's talk about him as like inspiration for a big bad villain. What do you guys think?
I mean, like, he is one of the, in video game villains, there's a lot of, oh, he's the evil guy, like, he's real bad, and he's scary, but, like, I think Ganondorf is one of the ones where they did it right without, like, really trying to, because there's a lot to be said about a sympathetic villain, but sometimes, you know, it's almost refreshing to have a villain that is just evil and scary, and you want to stop him because he's evil and scary. And he might have interesting motivations, like Wind Waker kind of explored on it a little bit, but when you get down to it, his true backstory is that he's literally like the antithesis of everything that is good in the world, reincarnated.
And yet, at the same time, he's kind of the whole package as far as like big bad evil guy, right? In fact, like I remember I think it's the first time you experience him in Ocarina of Time is through the window with Princess Zelda, and like you see him like you see him like kneeling, like, because he's charismatic still. He's able to play the political game to gain power, and like he's magical, although he can still wield a sword and he can fight. He looks like he's a strong guy physically. He's kind of that whole package. And then you get to the end and there's that amazing battle where he turns into Ganon, which I think is great inspiration for the battle with your big bad villain at the end, right?
Yeah.
Is that you fight the villain and then there's more afterwards.
Oh yeah, and I mean, like you said, he checks all the, like, everything you look for in like cool villains for your characters. He has power that is equal to he has power that puts him in equal to the Chosen One, in that he has the Triforce, while Link also has the Triforce, like where they each have a piece.
Yep.
And I mean, his represents his raw power. So I mean, he's a character who has the ability. He's humanoid just like you. He has the same kind of divine powers just like you. He has the ability to kind of manipulate and play politics in the same kind of way that Link does, just, you know, for good, not evil, throughout Ocarina of Time. I mean, it just, especially the fact that, like, theoretically Zelda would have loved to be able to do something about it, but you can't because they had no proof about him. I mean, having a villain like that where you can introduce him to the players very quickly, and you can telegraph how evil he is to them because they understand tropes, but you can introduce them to him in the middle of a castle court and they can't do anything about it.
Exactly, yeah. Whereas Link has to prove himself, Ganondorf is walking around and people are totally respecting him, asking for advice. He's got nothing to prove. It's up to you as the heroes to prove that there's something nefarious going on.
Yeah, and that two-stage boss battle is perfect.
Yes.
I think, yeah, I have a whole like rabbit trail of like how to do that from like a design perspective. Having the first part be strong enough, then my thought would be to give them that moment of rest and then kick it off, but then kind of retroactively give them a short rest, giving some mechanical essence of like getting some of their stuff back, because then having the next fight possibly be even more brutal, because like you're saying, I feel like you can definitely have two very different versions of the fight. I mean, it's one where it's, yeah, like you said, it's dexterous, it's pong, and then it's just beast.
Well, and I mean, like, the thing is, it's like whenever I'm kind of designing what those big bombastic final encounters are, a lot of times it is that choice of like, do you want the giant monster that the players might not even know if they can beat, or do you want the guy that's about the same size as the players and somehow is just like an equal to all of them combined and just blocking attacks and shrugging everything off, and I mean, you really have both of that with Ganon.
Absolutely.
And I mean, you know, even in the game, they make you think that you won the fight. You're escaping the castle. It's like, oh, the whole castle's going down. This is it. This is the final chase, you know? And he comes out of the rubble as giant beast Ganon.
Now, what about the real boss of the game, the real true villain, which of course I'm speaking of Dark Link.
Oh man. Just get a hammer. It's fine.
Right, get the hammer or the broken Bigorons or the broken giant's knife.
True. Yep. One of the two, and then you're fine.
I mean, thematically, the whole idea of like the shadow fight is always something really cool. Like I don't think no one is excited to fight something, especially like when you have one of those power gamers or one of those people that you've seen kind of employ some really, we all have those players that employ those really creative strategies with what they have, and you're like, I never would have thought of them doing that, but now it's like, well, thanks for the idea.
Yeah.
I mean, I've done that where I've had the players, like, the shadows come up and they all turn and, like, look at their power, at the one who's a little more power gamer than the rest, and they all just immediately, like, get him first. We're gonna have so much trouble even hitting him.
Yep,
Let's
absolutely.
just...
I think I would individualize it though in that scenario. I'm trying. It makes me think of also a World of Warcraft mechanic where at one point during a big boss fight, everyone like separates into their own section, and basically as soon as you defeat your shadow self, you're then placed with someone else in their shadow self, and eventually all the shadow selves are defeated, and you
so
go back.
everybody goes through, like, a gauntlet of...
Yeah, and you go back to defeating the boss. So there's one that usually can't do in a World of Warcraft scenario and a D&D scenario. Then now that we're talking about it, you might have a cleric who's very heal heavy, so they don't really have any way to kill themselves in that shadow form. So they basically just have to survive long enough for the rest of the party to show up to be able to do that for them.
Well, and then tack on what we were talking about with Ganon's like inspiration there, and you could have it be, you have 5 PCs, whatever, and they're fighting their individuals, but then it leads up to this great shadow beast that comes together that is the dark antithesis of all of the players together, and it's this large monster that has all of the powers and abilities that they all have to fight together. That would be... You'd get through the shadow creatures of yourself, and you'd be like, dang, that sucked. And then there'd be a giant monster that is all of them together. Terrifying.
I mean, at that point, I'm almost thinking, like, you would even want to add a third phase of that fight where, if you're going to pit every player against himself, I mean, obviously, like, there's the idea maybe, like, shifting it so every player is battling a different shadow player, but then you end up situations like, where the cleric is trying to fight someone who they'll never be able to kill. But in my mind, it's almost like a 3-stage fight. Like, everyone fights their own shadow self, then it turns into a party versus party, where a lot of those, dynamics where, when God forbid you let the tank throw the rogue at the enemies, because that's what they always ask to do. The halfling rogue has some weird thing about being thrown. Absolutely. By the big guy, and then suddenly there's a shadow halfling rogue being thrown at them. I think it's a really cool moment that you can flip stuff back on the players, that they've been kind of a little bit of like personal DM vindication, revenge on the players. And then, you beat all of them and you think it's over, and they're all just inky black pools that suddenly then coalesce into a big, monster.
Terrifying.
If we're thinking of characters as well, my favorite character in every Zelda game that she shows up in is Impa. Because there is so much to that character, and so little of it gets explored, and it's like, you clearly have such an interesting life, and yet we never get to see like any of the coolest moments. Like this ancient order that protects the royal family that did like all this stuff in the past, apparently, and like, I mean, Impa, how she's the one who spirits Zelda out of the castle when Ganondorf takes over. And it's just like, you have this whole cool, like, secret ninja order character. And you see a lot of, like, what they can do in Sheik, but apparently Impa would have been the one that trained Sheik in everything. Like, one of those, I mean, having a character, especially if we're talking about a theoretical campaign with a Ganondorf like character that is amassing power in the world and making political movements, and you can't really do anything outwardly to him because of the power that he wields. I mean, a character that is just a member of the court that's secretly this amazing secret ninja has a lot of potential. I don't know, Ed, if you guys.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of am thinking about her in the sense of bringing her as inspiration, just like Kaepora Gaebora as a sort of guide to the players, who I think is perfect, shrouded in mystery. Not seeing that they're powerful, but yeah, not knowing everything about them.
Like, I want to know everything about them. I recognize the storytelling device. It's way cooler that we don't. But it's just like, I'm like, where'd you learn this stuff? Mm-hmm. Are there others like you? Like,
what is your story? But then, like you said, I don't want to know everything because it'll take away from the fact that I don't know everything. I constantly want to know more, but not get the information. But definitely one of the coolest characters because she's so good at anything she's doing, and then just literally just rides off, and that's it. That's what you see.
All right, one more thing to discuss that we need to discuss before we move on to discussing the elements of story for inspiration. We got to talk about, with the world building in Ocarina of Time, the temples throughout the game, because the temples that Link has to go through are, in my opinion, some of the greatest inspiration for dungeon crawls that you can find in a video game.
When I'm talking about designing dungeons, the two things I think of Zelda, and believe it or not, I also tell people to look at the Metroid Prime series. But, I mean, what great examples of both building dungeons around themes that feel like a cohesive experience and not just like a bunch of rooms smacked together.
Absolutely.
Building dungeons that actually, you aren't just going through a linear structure. You're kind of exploring it and figuring it out, and a little bit of backtracking, but discovering new things when you backtrack. Like, it's a masterclass in good ways to build a dungeon on tabletop.
And I played this game when I was younger, but what I do remember of specifically the Water Temple, which is where you fight Dark Link, is it being challenging. I remember like having a tough go at some of these temples, playing and enjoying it. Like, I feel like this may have been one of the first times as a younger gamer that I really was given this difficult challenge, and now I'm playing Dark Souls and going, man, I love the challenge, right? But like, when I was younger, this was one of the first times that I was like, oh my gosh, this is difficult.
Yeah, I mean, so much of the time, like, and obviously, the time you put into building a dungeon is only the time that you can have. No, we aren't all we don't, I don't think this is the only full-time job that any of us are doing in dungeon mastering, but it's one of those things where it's like, when you're able to put in the time to make a dungeon like that, where it's not just the players going, all right, we did this room, what's the next room we haven't gone into yet? Like, where they just have the map and they're like, well, there's a door we haven't kicked down yet, let's check out that one. Which, it can turn into a lot, even when you're very much trying not to make it that. It's difficult sometimes to create that aspect, but I mean, really, like, the way, the controlling, the controlled exploration of things like specific keys and items that unlock stuff. Because, I mean, even a locked door,
even outfits, right? Because Link has to wear certain outfits for certain dungeons, or he's doomed to fail.
Yep. Can't swim, or like you said, with the Water Temple, the big thing was like, do you have the blue tunic? Do you have the weighted boots? Which water level is it at now? Which water level do I need it to be at next? And the back and forth of that. And the biggest thing for me, Jerad, you kind of hit on it, is that not only is it not just not linear, it's not two-dimensional. And so like replaying through Ocarina of Time definitely can help you add a third dimension to your dungeons. And I know I'm one who doesn't do that as much as I would like, because every time you see your dungeon, it's on a 2D piece of paper.
Yeah,
and
it is very hard to visualize.
when you draw the map, it's you're drawing it on a graph paper and doing things like that. So adding that third dimension is really, I think, is a really good way to pull from Ocarina of Time.
Three-dimensional dungeon's gonna plug Tailspire. It's not. I have nothing to do with it, but man, that's a cool tool where you can build dungeons with that. Like, I mean, and I believe it's actually the beta's dropping in probably this month. I mean, it'll probably be dropped by the time this episode drops. But I mean, like, if you're not to tangent off, but if you're looking to build stuff and build like three-dimensional dungeons and get out of thinking about like that 2D space, such a cool tool.
Yep.
Awesome. Well, let's jump into the story. Let's use the remainder of our time to talk about the story of Zelda, Ocarina of Time, and what inspires us for a D&D campaign.
So, even from the beginning, directly from the instruction booklet I shall read. Before life began, before the world had formed, 3 golden goddesses descended upon the chaotic land of Hyrule. They were Din, the goddess of power, Nehru, the goddess of wisdom, and Faeror, the goddess of courage. Yeah, I think it's just a really interesting origin story, and then also having that essence be folded into the Triforce. And so I'm a huge fan of how they set up the world itself, because those are the main deities, and then you have lesser, potentially what people could consider as lesser gods as well. So even from a pantheon perspective, I really like the way that Hyrule and Ocarina of Time is set up.
I mean, if we're talking deities, I mean, the idea behind all these influences of Din, Faeror, and Nehru, I mean, you can see it in so many things, and the cultures that are influenced by them, and like little things like designs of like the different goddesses' symbols are like in different cultures, like in their architecture and stuff, like little details that really add to like understanding the world better as a whole, and it feeling more like, oh yeah, these gods that have a hand. And then the fact that they aren't there like a lot of these other smaller powerful things are, like certain creatures that are kind of like lesser deities to different cultures. You have 3 gods that more or less made a thing, and like made a pretty problematic thing of the Triforce that everybody wants, and then just pieced out. Like,
where should we put it? Over there looks good.
Right, like,
All right.
make them need some stones to get it. Like,
Yeah.
which theoretically, I mean, in that in itself is a neat idea, in that you needed the Kokiri stone, the Goron stone. I forget if they have more specific names, or like the Forest stone and stuff. But like, you needed these 3 big cultures. They're like symbols to all be presented. So I mean, theoretically, the Triforce should have only been something that was attainable at a time of peace and prosperity, if all these cultures could come together and present their stones to the temple.
And speaking about using the Triforce as inspiration, one of the things that I love about this game is, spoiler alerts, the ending when you defeat Ganon. He gets thrown into, I believe it's called the Shadow Realm, but he still has the Triforce of power. And he says, like, I'm gonna break out, I'm gonna come, I'm gonna rule the world. This is not the end of me. And like, to me, I go like, that's great inspiration for a campaign ending of like, yeah, you won. You defeated the evil. You defeated the evil one. They still have this powerful item, even where you sent them, which even may be to death. They brought it with them to the underworld. Who knows? But like this looming presence of, yes, this is a victorious day. This is good. This is happy. But I almost imagine you can end your campaign with a post-credit scene, right? Where you see the evil character, and maybe you have like this little description where you say thousands of years in the future, and then that's something you could pick up in your world with new characters somewhat down the line of this returning evil because they still have this powerful item.
Yeah, and I mean, honestly, what does it mean that Ganon still has the Triforce of Power? Like, is that by design, by the gods, by the goddesses who made it? Like,
was it made for him? Yeah.
Like, I mean, you would think that if they were so serious about it being protected, that it wouldn't be made in a way that someone evil would be able to just be like, "No, this, it's mine now. Don't worry about it." Like,
Yeah.
you can't take it from me. Good luck trying. Like, it's not gonna happen. Kill me, I'll still have it. Like,
yeah, it's this like almost you could build in this theology in your world of and this like thought process of morality that yes, evil is going to rise and evil is almost meant to rise. However, good is always meant to rise up and meet it. And yeah, I love that idea. For a fantasy world, that's fantastic.
And now my brain keeps this is not that helpful, and maybe it is helpful, so I'll say it anyways. But now all my brain can think about is like, I don't even want to say fan fiction, but like the idea of like, what if it's another 10 years, 15 years? Because that's one thing you don't really get with Zelda games is like a truly older Link. For the most part, he's either young or not as young.
You're imagining like white hair, white beard Link.
Well, I'm just thinking because
scarred and
if playing off of Ocarina of Time, if Ganon still has the power, then Link still has some too. And so then like these people are holding on to these bits of power until, is there a way that Link could choose to pass that on to someone? Is it only when he would die? And so then Ganon showing up like I said, like 15 years later, and Link's just like older but ready, like totally ready for it. Because that's the other thing. Part of that story is like, there's like, you believe Ganon. Like, he's gonna come back. He has the Stone of Power. Like, it's gonna happen. So then preparing for that and being ready for when he does.
So let's wrap this up by talking about, in my opinion, one of the most compelling elements of the story is, we talked about a little bit at the beginning, but that time jump. Using that as an element in a D&D campaign where your playable characters shift through time to a different period of time. If we're taking from Ocarina of Time, we're talking much darker. The world is in the grip of evil, but what is it that you like? What is it that inspires you, and what ideas come from that element of this story that you would want to bring into a D&D campaign?
So I just wanted like 2 seconds to mechanically touch on that, because it's designed beautifully for the way that it is. It's not free time travel, because a lot of people like me wince at the idea of trying to figure out time travel and timelines in a campaign, especially with chaotic players already. Like, yes. When you have, it's 2 timelines that are running along the same line, and they're running just forward in time. Like, you always go 7 years back every time you go back. Every time you go forward, you go 7 years forward. So you're never crossing over your own timeline. You know, it's always it's along these same lines. So everything you do in the past is still there, and goes into the future, and then everything you do in the future stays in the future. And I mean, it allows for so many, like, oh, this thing could be changed in the past, so let's change it in the past and then come back to the future and see what changed. It leads so well to that as a functional mechanic in a game that won't break everything.
Yeah, because like you said, you're never dealing with, and whatever rules you have in regards to time travel, no matter how ridiculous, no matter how far-fetched, no matter how simple, that's all you got to do is follow those rules. That's it. Like, once you establish them, you have to follow them, no matter what media you're in, especially in a D&D game. But yes, I do love the idea. You can never cross over with yourself in this method. You are either here or you are there. And also that added element of, in that space, you are gone. And so then what happens because your players are not there? That which obviously things go very sideways in Ocarina of Time.
I think I really just love the idea of playing a campaign where the characters start off as children, and kind of that, like, taking that element we talked about of, like, they don't necessarily feel like the heroes, and people don't look at them like the heroes because they're kids. But to run around and give them some sort of adventure as kids, but then to shoot them forward in time where they are adults and they could be seen as the heroes. And but yeah, just like, and maybe mechanically you have some sort of different element to that, making them less powerful as their children's selves, and then bringing them forth into the future where like you grant them even more powerful aspects to them. But I love that element of role playing from like, we were children, now we are adults, especially if it's talking about like this darker world, how you react to that.
I love the whole, I mean, obviously, when I say springing stuff on your players, it depends on your group and how receptive they would be to total like shifts in what you tell them is going to be.
That's a huge shift in role playing, right? It's like you are playing a 10-year-old child to you are playing a 30-year-old man or whatever it is. Yeah.
Right. And it's like, you know, like I have players at my table who they would probably, they let me get away with so much stuff because like all the campaigns that reach the greatest heights are the ones that break the rules in certain places. Like following all the, you don't do this, you don't do that will only ever get you like a solid campaign, in my opinion. But I mean, like, just the idea, like telling your players, like, yeah, you know, you guys are going to be kids, and as a result, you know, you'll be adventurous kids, but your stats are going to be low. Like, your highest stat might be a 10. Like,
yeah, don't expect to have a 20 strength.
Yeah, and then a third half the way through the campaign, all of a sudden, you know, it's flash of light, and you hand them each a new blank character sheet and tell them make a level 12 class. Just
even to like present the campaign in a sense of like this one might be a little bit shorter, like I don't want to like make you guys play like weak little like children for a long time, and then to drop that and be like, yeah, like we're technically the campaign is changing, but
and I mean, and you aren't lying to them because they still have the child side of the campaign. They can still go back and do stuff then. And I mean, there's that aspect of like, you know, maybe they take things that they get and learn in the future and, you know, go back and use that in the past and solve the problem on the large scale in the past. You know, maybe they stop the evil guy who's trying to get in with the king, you know, just through managing to do it as children through items they get and stuff they learn. But or, you know, maybe they go in the future and stop them when they have the power to physically, you know, go toe to toe with them.
Okay, it's our favorite time. It's time to give people some homework. Let's get it out of the way. Play Ocarina of Time.
Right.
So, I mean, there's that. You probably don't have a 64, but there are definitely different methods by which you could certainly play this game, be it a 3DS or I don't really want to condone openly just go play it on an emulator, but you could. I'll cut. Somebody cut that out in post.
Well, here for all the people in the world who legally own an emulated copy of the game, play it on an emulator. Wink, wink.
Shame on you. But play it. What else do we have
Mitch,
for
we're
homework?
talking about the people who legally own it, which is obviously everyone who's going to play it on an emulator are people who legally own it.
Absolutely.
So I touched on it before. I think, you know, not only just going to the wiki and getting like the dungeon maps and stuff, but check out the area design in the Metroid Prime series. You know, not all, it doesn't really differentiate areas into dungeons, but you can sort of see based with the sort of hex grid based areas that connect to each other, and the way it builds that with, you know, verticality here and there and certain items being useful in certain areas and the way it builds encounters around that. Just look at some maps from both Zelda and Metroid, and you're gonna get a lot of ideas on how to build a solid connected themed dungeon that actually promotes exploration and interest as opposed to what's the door we haven't gone through yet.
Absolutely. I'm just going to piggyback right off of that because my homework was go and check out all the temple maps and walkthroughs that are readily available on the internet because, I mean, for plenty of D&D players, you could literally play through that dungeon, that temple, and
Even
they
the
would have
2D
no
zones.
idea.
Like,
Yeah.
they might actually be easier to translate into a D&D map anyway, and
Yeah.
they still have good uses of verticality and everything that we just talked about.
Yeah, but I think those are fantastic resources ready that with just a little bit of work, you could make those into fantastic dungeon crawls for your players.
Yeah, if you want, and then to give something physical to read, there are like fully sanctioned, well-produced, insanely detailed guides to Hyrule, or basically not necessarily campaign settings, but something akin to that. Additionally, if you're super jazzed up and want to read, there's a manga version of the Ocarina of Time, so you can definitely read that as well.
Oh yeah, the Hyrule Historia stuff and everything.
Yes,
yeah.
there it is. Yeah.
Jared knows what you're putting down.
I was looking for my copy. Like, I stood up and I was kind of looking over where my stuff was, and I did not see it.
Jared, if our listeners would like to get in touch with you, ask you what are some of your other favorite games, or ask you specifics about all the Zelda games that you've played, what's the best place for them to get in touch with you at?
Definitely Twitter. I am DM Jerad, Jerad. I'm aware it's spelled wrong. That's the easiest place to get in touch with me. You know, I'll tweet out like random thoughts when I'm playing certain games that some people might find useful occasionally.
But you readily engage on Twitter too.
Oh, yeah,
So people ask you questions, send you their thoughts. You will be there to heed the call.
Oh yeah, I will respond 100% of the time. Just if you try to get me talking on anything that has to do with gameplay and story, like that's my bread and butter. Like
that's your bat signal.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, again, thank you, Jared, for joining us for this conversation. Thank you, Patreon Dragons, including Jared, for voting for this Council 2 campaign episode. We will be putting up another vote, so make sure you engage in that. But Jared, we hope to have you back on sometime in the near future. We want to thank Jared again for joining us for the discussion of Zelda, Ocarina of Time. And thank you to all you Patreon Dragons who engaged on the vote for this episode. And hopefully you will engage on the next vote, and we will come out with the best of our three options: God of War, Final Fantasy VII, and Turok. I mean, if you listen to the episode, I think you know which one me and Jared would like to win, but I don't know about Neil. I don't know if you want to,
Meh.
Neil's going to bury the lead on that one. Anyway, if you would like to get in touch with us, maybe you have been inspired by Ocarina of Time in some way that we weren't able to talk about in this episode, and you'd like to fill us in, Neil, where can they reach us at?
You can always email us at dungeonmasterblock@gmail.com. Send us, like Mitch said, how you've been adapting Zelda or any other video game you think we should start adding to lists for others to vote on. And of course, if you liked this episode and you see fit, or any of the other ones, head over to your podcatcher of choice and leave us a 5-star review. Helps us get in front of more people and inspire them further.
You can follow us on Twitter at DMS_block. That's at DMsBlock. And you can like our Facebook page. Both of those places will keep you up to date on all things going on in the Dungeon Masters Block.
As always, the Dungeon Masters Block is a proud member of the Block Party Podcast Network, where you can check out other shows like Geek Wars, We're So Bad at Adventuring, Detentions and Dragons, and more.
Well, that's all we have for you on this episode of the Dungeon Masters Block, the place where we come to talk about the Dungeon Master, the most important person in the game, the only person capable of playing God,
Killing characters,
and lowering the egos of all their people at the table.
I'm DM Neil. Stay classy, blockheads.
And I'm Dungeon Master Mitch, reminding you to always keep on dungeon mastering.